Tony from Unified Security. Today we're going to talk about default storage repositories, the local repositories that are created by the XCP-ng or Xen Server installer. If you take the defaults during the install process, it will use any of your disks that it sees locally as appropriate as part of that local SR. If you go to change that in the future, you're going to run into an error that the local cache is set on that SR and it cannot be removed or changed in any way. So if we just take a look real quick at Xen Orchestra here, what I've got in my storage repositories is a temporary RAID array that is currently marked as the default SR, and local cache is enabled on this. I'll show you how to determine that in the CLI, in the command line interface for Xen Server in a second. But the error that we're going to see if we did try to remove this SR is that local cache is enabled here, this SR is cache SR error. So let me just give you the basics of what this system looks like now hardware wise and what we want to get it to. The system currently has a temporary RAID array on an LSI HBA controller. Local cache is enabled on that, and it is the default SR, which is not really a problem here. There's also an SR on the NVMe drive that I've set up for testing purposes. The desired state is to move the default SR and that local cache to the new NVMe SR that is set up, to remove that temporary RAID array, create a new one on the HBA controller using all 5 drives. So in order to do that, first we need to make sure that all the VMs have been migrated away from this particular host. In this environment here, I'm just going to go ahead and stop this domain controller. And because I have it set to block that operation, you need to actually go in and stop it that way. Now at this point in time, Xen Orchestra is being hosted here off of sources built locally. So as soon as we stop this, we're going to lose access to Xen Orchestra, and that's just fine. Now I have an SSH shell up to that host. One thing that's important to note here is that if you enable SSH for maintenance like this, management operations like this, you're going to want to disable it afterwards. There is absolutely no reason to keep it active when you're not using it, and it just increases the surface area for attack. I have all of the commands I'll be using today hosted up on a GitLab organization page. That'll be linked in the description below. Let's first take a look at the SR list. And we can see that we have the local NVMe drive as well as a temporary RAID array. Now, as I mentioned, if we want to find the detailed information about the SR list, such as where the local cache is located, we can use the params equals all argument there on that function. We can see that we have the NVMe drive, which is not local cache enabled. And then if we go down, we can see we have the temp RAID array that is indeed local cache enabled. So what we need to do first is disable the host. With host disable. And then we can also, there is another, if you see here in the available host commands, there is a disable local storage caching option as well. So once we've done those two things, we can go ahead and proceed here. Now that the host is disabled, all of the SRs we can maintain at this point in time. Nothing is attached, nothing is active. So we'll go ahead and stop the RAID array now. Once that's stopped, we can go ahead and create the new one using all 5 of the disks on the HBA controller. It's going to warn us that it sees an ext file system on those drives, and that's just fine for our purposes here. So at this point in time, we can set the default SR for the pool itself over to that NVMe drive, and we can also enable local caching on the NVMe drive itself. And then we can actually host enable now. And we'll start up just our Xen Orchestra VM. And I'll start up another DNS server here that I have to make this just a little bit easier. So we've given Xen Orchestra a second to start up here. It should be up and running. Now at this point in time, we have that new array actually created. It obviously does not exist currently as a storage repository, so we can go ahead and create that. And we'll name it RAID crash dump. And it is a local ext device in my case here. It's dev md0. So at this point in time, we can go ahead and go to the pool properties here, in the advanced pool properties, and set that crash dump SR to that new RAID array that we just created. And then let's take a look at the CLI and make sure that local cache is enabled where it's supposed to be. So we have local cache enabled on the local NVMe repository. And we've got our RAID crash dump SR set up here. So at this point in time, we are good to go.